It didn't take long for House GOP leaders to rush to Donald Trump's defense.
I've said from day one, this is a political stunt.
Attacking Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg over the unprecedented indictment of a former president on criminal charges.
I have zero trust that this will play out fairly.
Today, Bragg's office pushing back. In a scathing letter to three House GOP chairmen who have sought his testimony and internal records, accusing them of doing Trump's bidding, and writing, as committee chairman, you could use the stature of your office to denounce these attacks and urge respect for the fairness of our justice system and for the work of the impartial grand jury. But House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says that Bragg will be held to account. Sources say Trump is expected to be accused of falsifying business records to cover up 2016 payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels to keep quiet allegations of an extramarital affair. But no one has seen the evidence prosecutors have uncovered.
Mr. President!
Though that didn't stop one congressman to claim the prosecutor could have indicted the ham sandwiches he was handing out on Capitol Hill.
So I know how to spot a pile of garbage, and this thing looks like a pile of garbage.
Even without seeing the evidence, you're certain he's innocent.
I'm not certain of anything except this. This is the first time in the history of the country we've indicted a president. And the fact that, he's just now announced and they rolled this thing out, it smells pretty fishy.
Top Republicans agree, despite not seeing the charges.
Aren't you jumping to conclusions? I mean, he might have broken the law. Does that concern you?
We don't think President Trump broke the law at all.
But there has been silence from Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell and his number two, John Thune, who told CNN earlier there were legitimate questions about Bragg, though he would not align himself with House GOP efforts.
Do you support House Republican efforts to call Alvin Bragg up here and get him to testify?
I'm not going to get into what the House is doing there.
Two other members of Senator McConnell's leadership team did come out and criticize Alvin Bragg. That's Senator John Cornyn and Senator John Barrasso. Cornyn, Barrasso, and Thune all seen as potential successors to McConnell down the line, and also some other reaction and some others warning against a rush to judgment. That coming from Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, one of the senators who voted to convict Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial, saying that she's monitoring the situation. Everyone deserves a fair legal process, but she says we should evaluate the evidence as it becomes available, showing the divide once again that exists over Donald Trump among Republicans on Capitol Hill.
All right, Manu Raju, thank you so much, Manu. Let's turn now to CNN legal analyst Carrie Cordero and CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe. So, Carrie, walk us through what this is going to look like when Trump appears before a judge on Tuesday.
Well, it's a big question because this is such an unusual and unprecedented situation. So I think at this point, we don't know exactly what it will look like because it has the potential, of course, to be an enormous spectacle for the country. If the former president wants to talk to microphones, if he wants to wave to supporters, depending on how the court and the judge actually handles the processing of him. So a lot, I think, depends actually on the security precautions that go into place and the interactions and the planning and the coordination that takes place between the Secret Service, which is responsible for the former president's protection, and the court security and the New York Police Department. And those law enforcement agencies really are going to play a big role in terms of what we actually see on the public side on Tuesday.
Yeah, there's a lot of coordinating right now ahead of Tuesday for that very reason. Andrew, Trump's lawyers are saying they're going to file a motion to dismiss. Do you think they have a strong case to do so?
Well, I'm quite sure they will. I'm sure there'll be a lot of pretrial motions that'll end up delaying any progress in this case as it goes down the road. I mean, I think there are many potentially challenging legal issues baked into this case. We don't know exactly what the DA has charged the former president with. We'll find that out on Tuesday. But I think most commentators believe that it's founded on charges involving false business records, which may become felony charges if the falsification is done with the intent to cover up or commit a second crime. It's where that second crime comes in that there's all sorts of questions about whether or not you can use as a second crime, for instance, a violation of federal campaign finance law, which is one theory that the prosecutor might have used here. So no matter what the prosecutor has done, I'm confident that Trump's lawyers will challenge the legal theory and the legal soundness of this case in an effort to get it knocked out early in the process. Whether or not they're successful, we'll have to see.
We keep talking about how historic this is, unprecedented, Carrie, and it raises the question, if this does go to trial, how would a former president get an untainted jury? I mean, everyone knows who he is. Everyone has very strong opinions of him.
Right, although there are cases involving celebrities and other well-known people. So this obviously is historic and it would be highly unusual. But I would just emphasize that there is a real long road before we ever get to a potential trial. As Andrew was describing, the former president is going to file motions to dismiss. Those motions, I think, will have some credible arguments to them in terms of challenging the prosecutor's legal theory in this case. And so the motions practice may go on for a period of time, even though right now publicly the former president's lawyer is saying that there is not going to be a plea and that he will plead not guilty. As the case progresses and as discovery takes place, it's a possibility that they could reach an agreement, for example, to end up with just a misdemeanor if the former president at some point just wants to put this behind him and move forward. So I just think we're a really long way away from a trial, and there's a lot of legal process that is going to take place in the meantime.
What do you think, Andy? What are some big questions you have moving forward, given the unprecedented nature here?
Well, Pam, it is unprecedented, and we've all said that a lot in the last 24 hours. But I think we have to remember that there are a lot of things that have been unprecedented about this president. It's unprecedented to have elected a president who used to run a charity that got blown up by the state for essentially being a fraud. Unprecedented to have a former president whose company that he founded and ran got recently been convicted of multiple counts of tax fraud. It's unprecedented to have had a president who rallied an armed riotous mob to attack the Capitol. It's unprecedented to have had a president impeached twice. So we should be prepared for unprecedented things to happen around Donald Trump. I think in many ways, an indictment in this case, it was not that surprising. He's currently the subject of 4 very aggressive, very serious criminal investigations. This is just the first one to go this far.